Circle of Hope Network, doing life and being church together.
You can tell I'm very romantic. I'm thinking of her, a nice chainsaw or some wrenches.
I'll tell you that this is the truth. I'm not making this up. Some of this stuff you cannot make up. I'll tell you what he gave me one year. He wrapped it all up in a beautiful package for Mother's Day, and I opened it up. It was a toilet seat. A brand new porcelain white toilet seat.
It was pretty though, wasn't it? Pretty.
As far as toilet seats go, it was okay.
You can tell we have a good time together anyways. Well, thank you for coming back day after day and for participating, for sharing with your laughter and your questions. And we're going to finish up. We talk about the 12 ingredients of successful families, or 12 ingredients of disciple-making families. And so we're down to the last 3. Now, before we do the last 3, you might look at the entire list and think, boy, this is almost overwhelming to think all of these things we have to do in order to be successful. Well, some of you, I'm sure, are already doing some of them anyways. And if you're not, what we would encourage you to do is to just look at one and see if you can make changes and apply that one. Don't say we're going to go home and try every single one of them all at once if you're not doing them. But rather just say, okay, of these, which ones am I not or are we not practicing or putting into practice? So let's just try that one to begin with. And that way you can begin to make the changes a little at a time. Otherwise, again, it will become a little overwhelming to try to do everything all at once.
Today we're going to start off by talking about one of the most important things for families, and one of the things that families have the greatest conflict about, and that's finances. Know the truth about money. Let's look at Matthew 6:21 and be reminded of what that says. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Where's your treasure this morning? Is your treasure what's in your wallet? You know, recently they did a survey among Americans, and they asked Americans this question: what would you be willing to give up for $10 million? If I gave you $10 million right now, what would you be willing to give up? 25% of those surveyed said that they would give up their family. They would walk away from their entire family. Give me the money right now. I will leave my family. Another 25% of those surveyed said, I would give up my faith in God. God's not that important to me. Give me the money. And 16% of all the men surveyed said, take my wife. You can have my wife for $10 million.
If you followed the Sabbath school lesson during the first quarter, it was written by our friend and colleague at the North American Division, Dr. John Matthews. And hopefully you got the point that stewardship is not something that we do when we return tithe and offerings. That's only part of stewardship, but even stewardship of our family, stewardship of our time. Let me ask you a question, because you might not know this. Do you know the number one cause of divorce? Or someone said money. Obviously, you don't know, so I'm going to tell you the number one cause of divorce is marriage. All right, so let me rephrase the question. What is the number one complaint in most marriages? And that's why we talk about money. It seems like most people fight over money and argue about money and even divorce over money, and then fight after the divorce over money than most people. So that's why it's important that we talk about what money does in our family and how to turn that into an element of success instead of something that destroys our relationship. So we'll begin by giving you a few questions, and again, just answer them to yourself, and it's a simple yes or no question so that it'll hopefully help you to think about where money stands in your relationship. Do you usually use credit cards to finish out each month? We recently came from Ukraine, and as we were talking about these things, they said, we don't use credit cards here. Well, that's because of the situation there. You know, I don't know if you've ever been to Ukraine. I think some of you have been. Ukraine was part of the Soviet Union, and you can still see the effects of so many years of communist rule. You can still see in some areas of Kiev the old rows and rows and rows of buildings, apartment buildings, and they're sort of deteriorated and all that. Anyway, so because of that, they just didn't trust much of the credit economy. It's all cash. Well, in the United States, and I'm guessing it's probably about the same thing in Canada, it's important to have a good credit history. I would explain to them in the Ukraine that if in the United States, and again, I think it's probably about the same here, if you want to buy a car and you don't have a good credit history, unless you're going to pay cash, you're going to have to pay a very high credit interest rate, I should say, because you don't have a credit history. If you're going to buy a house and you don't have a good credit history, your interest rates will be very high. So it actually, in our economy, it helps to have a good credit history. But I hope you heard the words, a good credit history. Not just a credit history, but a good credit history. So for instance, in our case, we buy just about everything with credit cards, but we pay the balance at the end of the month. We never carry a balance. If you carry a balance, then you have to pay fees, and that's when it begins to work against you. So we try to make credit cards work in our favor. We get rewards from the credit cards, but we pay the balance at the end of the month, so we never pay any kind of fees. And so therefore, when we go buy a car or when we bought our house, our credit rating is so good that the interest rate is very low. So ask yourself this question: do you usually use credit cards to finish out each month? Because your paycheck doesn't go far enough, then do you have to pull out the plastic in order to just finish up the end of the month? Number two, do you ever pay your bills late? Again, if you do, you're hurting your credit rating, your credit history, and sometimes you have to pay additional fees. And you might think, well, I only had to pay $3. Well, you add $3 there and $4 here and 50 cents here, and all that adds up to a good amount of money. Number three, do you float funds from one expense account to pay the other? So you have in your budget, you have your money for gas, but this time you didn't have enough money for telephone, so you get money from the gas account to pay the phone bill. If you keep doing that, you may end up hurting yourself. Do you ever hate to hear the phone rings? Well, we actually kind of dislike when the phone rings, but not because of creditors. It's just that a lot of people call us, and in fact, that's one of the reasons why we don't give our phone number to too many people. I know several of you have asked us, can we call you? And we said no, because we travel too much. We're sometimes in a different time zone. And sometimes people think, I like to call them, but they forget that there's also all kinds of other people who would like to call us. But if the reason I hate to hear the phone is because of creditors, you know, it's the people asking, are you going to pay us or what? And if you don't pay us, we're going to sue you, or we're going to send the police to arrest you or whatever it is, or to evict you. So I don't want to answer the phone. I hate to answer the phone because I know it's people asking for my money. Is that the case with you? Here's the fifth question. Do you always pay the minimum payment on your credit cards? Some time ago, the credit card companies were forced by the law to show at the bottom of your bill, if you only make the minimum payment, this is how long it will take you to pay off the total balance. And I think that has helped some people to see that if that's all you do, you're just barely paying the interest and a little bit of the principal. It could take you years and years to pay off the balance that you have. Is that what you do? Now, in some cases, and we don't have the time to talk about that, but if you have a number of credit cards, You know, the average household now has about 5 or 6 credit cards, and they are all being used, and sometimes they are all maxed out. So when you have, let's say, 5 credit cards, we say, hey, pay the one where you have the smallest balance, but the other ones just make the minimum payment. But aim to pay the one with the smallest balance first. And once you pay that off, then add that payment to the second one that has the balance. And in that way, you pay everyone a little at a time. But the key is don't keep spending. You know, let's say, for instance, I have 5 credit cards, and one, the payment or the balance is $5,000, the other one, $4,000, $3,000, $2,000, $1,000. Make every possible payment to that $1,000 payment. Let's say $100 a month, so that in 11 months or 12 months it's completely paid off. But then add that $100 to the second payment, the second credit card. So instead of paying $50 on the second one, you're now paying $150. And when you finish paying that, then you have $150 to what? To the third card. That when you're making $50 payments, now you have $200 payments. You'll see how fast you can pay off all of your debts. We call that the snowball effect. I don't know if you guys know what snow is. It's the white stuff that falls in the winter months in the northern areas of the northern hemisphere. So if you've never seen it, I can send you a picture. But, well, the snowball effect is what happens when you make a little ball and you start rolling it and it grows and grows. Well, that's what you do with credit cards. You pay the one with the smallest balance, and little by little the payment increase, and by doing that, the debt decreases. That's why we call it the snowball effect. Here's another question. Do you never tithe or make charitable gifts? Well, I'm sorry, I just can't afford to tithe because of all of my debts. That's the worst thing that you do. Exactly. I'll tell you, when I became a Seventh-day Adventist, when I was a young man at the age of 18, I had fallen into a pattern where I would get paid on Thursday, and by Sunday, I had already spent my money for that week, and so then I had to borrow money from friends to tie me up until Thursday. But then on Thursday, I had to pay my friends, and so by Sunday, I was already broke, and then I had to borrow money. And so I had fallen into that pattern. So when I was starting to study the Bible, and my pastor taught me about tithes and offerings, and I said, there's just no way. It's not going to happen. I said, Pastor, it's just not going to work. I already don't have enough money as it is. But he says, well, why don't you test God? And so I said, okay, let me do that. So I tested God, and I don't know. I have no explanation other than God doing it. But that first week, my paycheck, after paying my friends, I returned my tithe, obviously. That first week, my paycheck lasted the full week. It hadn't happened before. And so therefore, I didn't have to borrow money anymore. And of course, the first thing I did was return the tithe, and it lasted, and I tell you, it has lasted for the last 43 years. We don't have big, expensive cars. In fact, we never have had big, expensive cars. There was a time when the 4 of us, our 2 daughters and Pam and me, had a little Civic. That's all we had, and we traveled all over the country with that little Civic, but it was paid for. And it lasted. We never drive cars for 4 years. Usually we drive our cars for at least 7 to 10 years, way beyond when they're paid. And God has continued to bless us. So we don't have luxury. We don't have big, expensive items. We just have been able to survive well, live well. We've never been hungry either, because God has blessed us with our faithfulness. So be faithful and test God. Don't think I'll take care of the tithe and offerings after I take care of my debts. No, take care of God first, and then the rest, and you'll see that God will take care of you. It's a promise that He makes. Is the savings or retirement account non-existent? I don't know what it's like here in Canada, but you know, people that think that they're going to survive with their Social Security in the United States are in serious trouble. Because Social Security is not that much, and there's always that threat that it may not even last. And so you have to make sure you have more than just the bare minimum Social Security saved for retirement. Number 8, have you had more than one overdraft check on your bank account this past year? Well, some of us don't even write checks anymore, but still, if you're not careful, your account could be overdrawn. And so have you had at least more than one? It could be that once in a while you forgot or there was a mistake, and so there was one check that was overdrawn that caused you to be overdrawn. But if it's a regular thing, every other month or so, and what happens is that then you have to pay a fee on that check. So it doesn't help you either. Do you dream of getting rich quickly? Well, I have to confess I do. I pay very close attention to the lottery, but I keep not winning. Of course, I never buy a ticket, so it kind of works against me. But you know what I think? If I think of all the times that I haven't won the lottery because I haven't bought a ticket, I'm actually ahead because I haven't spent the money on tickets. So I'm actually doing better than the people who have spent the money and haven't won. But do you dream, if I can just get rich quickly, then I think I would be better off? Well, we may never get rich, but has God taken care of our basic needs? And that's where we're at.
God actually has a financial plan for your family. So we're going to talk about some of the principles from God's Word. Number 1, transfer ownership of everything to God. I need to understand that everything I have because God has given it to me. I need to understand that the home I live in, the secure roof that I have over my head, is because God has provided it. The vehicle I drive every day, that God has given me a vehicle that I can depend on. The job I have that gives me a paycheck, I need to understand that God led me to that and planted me there. So understanding this concept that the material possessions that we own, it's not because of anything that I did. It's not because that I'm so great, but even the fact that I have clothes for my children to keep them warm in the winter, that I have food to put on my table for every meal. We need to recognize that it is a gift from God.
Number 2, and I don't think I have to tell you this, it's like preaching to the choir, but I'll say it anyways, tithe and give offerings joyously. And that's the key. If every month or every time you get a paycheck, you write your tithe and offerings check or the envelope and you're going like, I can't stand the fact that, I could have a new car one of these days and I could have more money. If you do it that way, then it's not joyously. But if you do it with joy, understanding it's not, I'm going to force myself to be joyful. I don't have to do that every time. It really, truly gives me great joy. Every time I get paid, the first thing I do is go to my computer, because in our church we do it online, and I turn in my tithe and offerings, and it gives me that sense of satisfaction knowing that I'm returning to God what belongs to Him. And then beyond that, I'm giving an amount out of thanksgiving for all that He does for me. Do it joyously. Remember the words from Paul. Remember this. This comes from a paraphrase of the Bible, the Living Bible. But remember this. If you give little, you will get little. A farmer who plants just a few seeds will get only a small crop. But if he plants much, he will reap much. Everyone must make up his own mind as to how much he should give. Don't force anyone to give more than he really wants to, for cheerful givers are the ones God prizes. God is able to make it up to you by giving you everything you need and more, so that there will not only be enough for your own needs, but plenty left over to give joyfully to others. That's what it means to transfer ownership of everything we have to God. When we say, everything is yours, but I know you give me the things that I need, I'm just returning to you a portion that can help somebody else as well. So remember that 10% means 10%. I saw a cartoon of a church where it says the light church. Like you have Coke Light and Pepsi Light, and this is the light church. And they said only 5% of the 10 commandments are obeyed here. Is that how we view the church too? We want to go to a light church, one where we don't have to give too much, one where we don't have to give of our time and we don't have to give of our money. That's the kind of church I want to go to, one that doesn't require a whole lot. Well, that doesn't give you much satisfaction either. Remember the laws of giving and receiving that it is more blessed to give than it is to receive. Isn't that the case? When we give, it gives us that sense of satisfaction. We're the ones that are blessed.
Go
Yes,
ahead.
sorry.
Read
Luke
that
chapter
verse.
6, verse 38, give, and it will be given to you, good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over will be put into your bosom. For with the same measure that you use, it will be measured back to you.
Number 3 is an important one. Work hard. And this is especially an important one if you are a parent here today and have a small child. We need to teach our children a strong work ethic. That is such an important character trait. Sometimes when our kids get old enough to have a job and they're 16, 17, 18 years old, we wonder why they don't want to get up and go to work. We wonder why they're not responsible. Maybe you haven't taught that in the home. Very, very young children should be given jobs to do. This is what Mrs. White says. From a very early age, our children should learn to work. It should accompany education. It's an important part of educating them, giving them age-appropriate chores from the time they are tiny. Even a 2-year-old, pick up your toys and put them away. And as they get older, give them age-appropriate chores in the house. That is not being mean. That is teaching responsibility. If you are a part of a family, you need to take on part of that responsibility of being in the family. Whether it's doing your own laundry, doing the dishes, doing the lawn, shoveling snow, whatever it is, all of our children need to have this and understand the value of working hard. If they don't understand the value of working hard, we can promise you that that is going to accompany some financial issues, some financial difficulties if they don't have that strong work ethic instilled in them from the time they were little.
Not too long ago, we saw a story, you might have even seen it here on TV. I don't remember what state it was in the States, but a 27-year-old guy was being sued by his parents to get him out of their house. 27 years old, he wasn't paying rent, he wasn't taking care of himself, he was just living off of them. And of course, there's different opinions. Some people who would say, I can't believe parents would kick their son out of their house. And of course, there's the opinion of saying, but he's 27 years old. Parents should not have to support a 27-year-old man who's not contributing to the well-being of the house. Of course, when he was interviewed, he said, well, I do buy my food. And they said, yeah, you buy your own potato chips. That's all you bring to the house. And eventually, the judge ruled against him, and he had to move out. Well, if your children are at home, I don't think there's any problem as long as they contribute. If they're not contributing, then I think it is time for them to move on. In fact, if you don't encourage them to move on, you might just be hurting them because they're not really learning what it's like to live as adults. And so teach them to work hard. Number 4, make realistic budgets and keep accurate records. In fact, if you don't have a budget, we encourage you to begin as soon as you get home. And the way to do it is keep track of your expenses for 1 to 2 months. And once you see what you're spending, then put those amounts in a budget. And if you don't know how to do a budget, there are plenty of budget sheets that you can find online that you can download. Some people, in fact, when we were in Ukraine, they were telling us that they follow the envelope method. You know what the envelope method is? You write a number of envelopes. You know, this is tithe and offerings, that's one envelope. This is the mortgage or the rent, that's another envelope. Here, the car payments, that's another envelope. And so in Ukraine, when they get paid, they put money in every one of those envelopes. And that way, when it comes time to spending, well, they get the money for the car payment and make the payment and then put the envelope back until the next paycheck. Well, we can do the same thing electronically or on the computer. You can have, things like an Excel spreadsheet or Quicken or those kinds of things. The point is that you have a budget, but the second thing is that you keep accurate records, that you stick to it. Because if you have a budget but you ignore it, then what's the point? So set up a budget and keep accurate records of what you spend and where you spend.
One more thing for that, for number 4, that I want to say, because that's a huge one for our young adults. Young adults now, most of them, according to research, are tens of thousands of dollars in debt by the time they leave college. And it's not because of college tuition. It's because of the little thing called the ATM machine at the bank. They go to the bank and withdraw money to have a good time that weekend, but they're not keeping records. They don't even write down how much they have withdrawn. And before they know it, they have overdrawn. And they find themselves in a situation with debt. So especially for our young people, we need to teach them to keep records. There again, when does that start? That starts when they're tiny, with helping them actually write out and keep records of what they're spending.
In fact, you reminded me of something. The second ingredient we said was preparing for marriage. And one of the things that some counselors recommend is that when you're dating and you're thinking about getting married, or maybe you're engaged, that one of the requirements should be to have your credit record and show it to your spouse or to your future spouse. Because again, some people hide that, and then they get married and realize that, the person I married, they are so deeply in debt that we're going to be in trouble for a long time to come. And so you should know that before you say I do. What is your credit record like? Do you have student loans plus mortgage plus car payments plus credit cards, and then you owe money to friends and this and that and the other? Is that the situation that I want to get myself into? My sister was a typical example of that. She was working at a law firm in Washington, D.C., had a stable job, had a good retirement, and then somehow she met some guy and decided to marry him. In fact, she was, at that time, she was 60 years old, and she married this guy who was 40 years old. And anyways, he was into buying. He had his own plumbing company he was trying to start it. So he was saying, can I buy this? Can I buy the other? Because of, the tools. And suddenly she found herself so far in debt that ended up having to file for bankruptcy and almost lost her own Social Security and her own home. All because she wasn't careful with the person that she chose to marry. To begin with, 20-year difference either way is a challenge. We were talking to young pastors in Ukraine the other day who are not married. They asked us to talk to them, and they said, is it okay to marry someone older than you? And I said, well, if you marry someone that's 50 years older and filthy rich, yeah, I think that's a pretty good idea. Other than that, I'm not sure that it's a good idea because it's a power differential. You're really not marrying someone equal. You're marrying, if it's someone that's 20 years older, you're marrying someone that's more of a father or mother figure. If you marry someone that's even older than that, then you're marrying someone who is more like a grandfather or grandmother figure. Do you want to have a relationship like that? To be quite blunt, a psychologist would say, do you want to make love to your grandma or your grandpa? So the power differential, the age differential can indeed be challenging. So be careful with the debts that the other person have. Number 5, get out from under the bondage of debt, and that's what we explained a little bit about the snowball effect and how you can accomplish that. So to do that, pay your bills, pay them on time. If not, if you're not able, get help. There are credit counseling agencies. Sometimes they are even able to reduce the debt somehow. And so see if you can get help some way so you can get out of that. And of course, sometimes you just have to change your lifestyle. So I know you have a brand new Mercedes-Benz. Well, you might have to sell that and buy yourself a cheaper Kia, or whatever the car is. And I'm not saying that Kias are bad. I'm just saying it may not be as expensive as a Mercedes or a Maserati or a Fiat or whatever the car it is that you drive. So sometimes you have to change your lifestyle in order to get out of debt so that you can have a better life, more stable lifestyle.
So what are some other ideas how we can teach our children to be good stewards? Well, number 1, we need to teach them the principle of true wealth. Here's a very simple idea to do if you have even a 2-year-old. First of all, when we give children that little money, we need to make sure we give it in tenths. And here's what I mean by that. never give a 2-year-old or 3-year-old a dollar bill. Give them 10 dimes.
They don't have dollar bills in Canada anyway.
To give them 10 whatever, okay?
Don't give them a loonie.
A loonie? I like those. Those are cute.
Yeah, a loonie.
Those are really pretty. Pugwash. Somebody gave me a loonie and pugwash because I thought they were so pretty. Anyway, whatever, break it down in tenths. I bet you already know why I'm saying that, don't you? Because if you want to teach the principle of tithing, break their money down into tenths. So just for the sake of my illustration, I'm going to use 10 dimes.
Well, they still have dimes.
Just for the sake of I'll use my 10 dimes. So if I give a very small child a 10 dime, as soon as they can count to 10, teach them how to tithe. We have many parents ask us, at what age should I teach my children tithing? As soon as they can count to 10. And then I will either give them 10 pennies or 10 dimes. And I will have them count 1, 2, 3, have them count 10. And then you have some envelopes you give them. And one envelope says tithe. And you say, you know what? Jesus only asks us to give him one of those. You see, you can't do this if you give him $1. Jesus only asks us to give him one. And kids are so generous. Most children will say, that's all Jesus wants? I want to give him more. You have to say, no, Jesus only wants one. So you take one of those and put them in the envelope or bank or container, whatever you have, that says tithe. And then you have another one that says save. Because we need to teach children, even tiny, the value and how to save money. And then the third container says to spend. So we have for Jesus, to save and to spend. And they take these dimes and they put in the various containers. Even from tiny, that's a very simple way to start teaching tithing as soon as they can count to 10.
There's your Canadian dollar bill.
There's my Canadian dollar bill.
Yeah,
it's
a little harder than the U.S. dollars.
See, that's a good example. You can't give this to a tiny child. Break it down. Break this into tenths, honey.
Give it back to me.
I don't know what this will buy, but
the principle of
he didn't
gratitude.
give me any Canadian money here.
It's an illustration. It's an illustration.
Illustration.
Teach them the principle of gratitude. We just talked about that we should be grateful for the things that we have. My younger daughter and I were in Belize, Central America, some time ago. In fact, when she was in academy, it was an academy mission trip, about a week long or so. And as we were riding to our construction site, the bus turned a corner, and there were two little boys there on the side of the road playing with sticks. And here the academy kids were looking at those two little boys, and they were going, oh, look at those two boys. They don't have anything to play with. And I said, you think those boys are not happy? I guarantee you that those boys are happier than 90% of the kids in America or in Canada who have a closet full of toys and yet will go to mom and dad and say, I'm bored. I don't have anything to play with. You see, those are not sticks. Those are swords. And tomorrow they will be airplanes. And the next day they will be cars or whatever their imagination will make them out to be. And they are happy. They don't know what PlayStation is. They don't know what a cell phone is. And then they don't miss it and they don't care. And we need to teach our children what you have, be grateful for. Don't be just grateful for the things that you wish to have, because you'll always be miserable. And if you translate that to adults, it's the same thing. So we are so upset because I have a car that's already 3 years old. Come on. There are people in this world that have never owned a car, that can't even think about what it would be like to own a car. So let's teach the principle of gratitude.
The principle of responsibility. This is especially important, like if you have teenagers and they learn to drive, you need to teach them. Along with driving the car comes responsibility. You're going to have to pay for gas to put in that car if you want to go anywhere. You're going to have to pay for your own insurance, etc., etc. teach them that they can't have everything they want. That when you do make money, when you do earn money, the money I make, I can't go out and have everything I want because I have responsibilities that I need to pay for first. I have the rent for my house. I have to pay for my car. Those are responsibilities. I have to pay for my food. Those come first before the list of wants.
And the principle of generosity again. Don't be cheap. Don't just give the leftovers. You know, I have to tell you, sometimes we Adventists are the cheapest people. I remember going to a church one time where I was a pastor, and I noticed we had all kinds of junk in the church. And this particular room was considered the youth room, and there was a TV, but it didn't work. And of course, I said to the church board, can we get rid of that? And they said, no, we can't get rid of that. And I said, why? I said, because Peggy gave it to the church. And I said, but it doesn't work. I know, but she may be hurt because she gave it to the church. But I said, but it doesn't work. You see, what happens often is the things that I don't want in my house, the junk that I don't want in my house, let's take it to church. Let's take it to church. Well, they don't work in my house. You think God is going to work a miracle and fix the lamp? You know, come on. And so why? In fact, I think it's disrespectful for us to take our junk and take it to church so that we can get a tax receipt. We don't do it out of generosity, but rather out of getting rid of junk that we feel guilty throwing away. That shouldn't be. So teach the principle of generosity.
And the last one, we need to teach our children delayed gratification. Let's say in that little envelope that I told you that says saving, they've been saving money for something they want, a toy or something. And they go to the store, oh, Mom, I don't have enough. I need some more money. I almost have enough, Mom. Can you make up the rest? You know, most parents make up the rest. That's the worst thing you could do, Mom and Dad. You need to teach them delayed gratification. If you really want that, you have to wait until you save enough money to have that. You know what happens most of the time if you do that? By the time they have enough money saved to get that, you know what happens? They don't want it anymore. You would have purchased it for them, and they don't even want it anymore. So we need to teach our children to save, to wait, delayed gratification. It is one of the most important. I know we're running late, we're going to have to rush, but I have to tell them this. I have to tell you one very important piece of research, because I love research. They researched a whole group of kids on this topic of delayed gratification. And they brought these kids into the room, and the researcher said to these very small kids, like 2 and 3 years old, the researcher says, I have 2 marshmallows in my hand. This is called the marshmallow test. You can Google it and read about it. I have 2 marshmallows in my hand. If you want it right now, I'll give you 1. But if you wait about 15 minutes, that's a long time for a little kid. If you wait, then you can have 2 marshmallows. And the researcher put them down and left. He said, now remember, if you want it right now, you can only eat 1. What they did, they followed these kids.
They even did the videos.
They followed them into adulthood. The researchers found out that the children who had learned delayed gratification, the children who waited, were more successful in life. They grew up to achieve their career goals, and their financial status, their academic achievement was much higher than that the child, I want it and I want it now. It's just a very simple test that proves this point of the importance of teaching our children delayed gratification.
And great, in number 11, admit when you need help and get it. And of course, Matthew 12:25 tells us, any kingdom divided against itself is laid waste, and any city or house divided against itself shall not stand. So if we need help, we should recognize it and find help. Here's 9 warning signs that your family may not be able to solve its own problems. Number 1, you go over the same issues again and again with no resolution or closure. Wasn't it Albert Einstein who said that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result? Why do we keep trying the same thing if it's not helping us? That might be a time to recognize that we need help. Number 2, when your networking is not working, it seems like your communication is broken. You're not really getting the message across to one another. It's time to get help. Number 3, when there is physical and or emotional abuse. Abuse should not be tolerated in our homes or in our churches. It surprises me still when I go to churches and people try to rationalize or excuse some forms of abuse. It should never be tolerated, and if it's happening in your home, you need to find help. Number 4, when you pretend to respect a family member whom you do not really respect. You know, the alcoholic in your family, and you act like, well, they're so funny and they're always jovial and cracking jokes, but you also know that they have a serious problem with alcohol. You pretend to respect them, but in reality, you know you don't. Number 5, when you're afraid to say certain things in your family. I better not say it because that's going to start an argument. Number 6, when you deny, excuse, or choose to ignore the signs of problems such as drug or alcohol abuse. Well, it's just our culture. That's the way it happens in our family, but as long as they keep it under control. Number 7, when you have a recurrent wish that you were out of the family or had out of your family or had never come into it at all. Oh, there may be times once in a while when that thought crosses our mind. Man, I tell you, wonder if I would be better off going my separate direction or whatever. So it may happen once in a while or every so often, but if it's a recurring thought, I wish I was out of here. I wish I had never married this person. I wish we hadn't been together. Then you need help. Number 8, when no one admits there's a problem and yet everybody knows that it exists. And number 9, when you ignore or excuse signs of bad behavior in a family member.
Why don't we get help? A lot of times other people can say that family needs counseling or they need professional help. Why don't we get help? Well, here's some 4 reasons. Let's put them up quickly, honey, because we don't have a lot of time. Pride, ignorance, lack of cooperation. Maybe one spouse is willing to go to counseling, but the other says, I'm not going.
That's embarrassing. I would never go to a counselor. So is that how you feel when you're sick? That's embarrassing. I'll never go to a doctor. No, that's not what we do. When we go to the doctor, we go to the dentist on a regular basis to keep ourselves healthy. We don't think that's embarrassing, but yet when it comes to help emotionally or psychologically or when it comes to the dynamics of the home, oh, that's embarrassing. No, it shouldn't be like that. Here are 5 steps to take in order to get help. Obviously, it's kind of like Alcoholics Anonymous. Well, the first step is to admit that there is a problem. As long as you keep denying it, you're never going to go look for help.
And we need to understand that getting help, especially for mental health issues, or for counseling in our families, it's not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength. You go if you have strep throat. You go if you have ear infection. You go if you have a kidney infection. Go if you have issues with your marriage. It's worth it.
Number 2, get a realistic but optimistic perspective of the problem. Some people are so negative that the moment they see you, they're already telling you, well, what you need to do is get a divorce. No, look for some optimistic views. Can we help you work this out? Number 3, ask every family member to accept their responsibility regarding the problem, because it's not just one person's problem. In a family, the dynamics involve everyone in the family. Number 4, make sure you approach the problem as a spiritual, not an intellectual battle. We are in a battle for our salvation. So it's not just that we disagree on things. The devil is trying to destroy us. So let's recruit God to help us win this battle. And number 5, find a skilled, godly counselor. On our website, we have a directory of counselors. Unfortunately, we don't have counselors everywhere in the States or in Canada. If you know of a good Adventist counselor, please have them get in touch with us because we would like to list them on that database. But if you go to our website, nadfamily.org, look for resources and then directory of counselors. It may be that there is one here in Canada where you live. But think twice before seeking outside help from the following sources. Social acquaintances. You just met someone or you have a friend and then you start talking to them about your problems. Be careful because that could develop into its own relationship, which then destroys the one that you have.
Or relatives. My mama may not be very, very objective. We need someone who's neutral to help us look at some of the situations we have.
Not only that, but then if we resolve our situation and they're angry, then that changes the dynamics with us too. So why get the whole family involved?
In fact, my mama would have taken your side.
Because she knew that I was right.
She really would have, that's the truth.
Colleagues, the same thing as social acquaintances. You know, you start talking with coworkers, and it could become very uncomfortable and may develop into a relationship that is not appropriate. How many times it's happened where affairs begin in the workplace because they have confided in one another? And of course, and we mentioned this as if you didn't know it, but non-biblical advisors. So what if you live someplace where there are no Adventist counselors, where there are no Christian counselors, and all you can have is a secular counselor? I can tell you, I was trained in psychology in a state university, so I understand some of the principles of secular psychology. I don't practice them. I don't like them. I don't advocate them. For instance, I never took a class on hypnosis. I don't believe in it. I think it's dangerous. But I know that if I go to a secular counselor, there are different kinds of hypnosis, rapid eye movement, all kinds of different things that they would practice that would make me very uncomfortable. So therefore, I have to be very guarded. And so that's why we discourage going to non-biblical advisors or secular counselors.
And the last ingredient we're going to talk with you about and finish up this in the next 10 minutes is establishing positive memories and traditions. They become so special, especially to our children. And look at this verse in the Bible. So then, brothers and sisters, stand firm, hold fast to the traditions that you were taught by us, either by word of mouth or by our letter.
So we're going to share just some ideas for building traditions in your home. Some of them we have indeed put them to use ourselves, or they have become our traditions in our home. I guess before we get to those, I'll just go through this quickly. Traditions bring family together, a family together, causing the members to know one another. That's how we transmit information from one generation to the next, to the next, to the next. Traditions create positive memories, which can provide encouragement and stability. Those are the things that we rely on sometimes when we are down, when we're discouraged. We remember those things that we've been told about our families. Traditions are cherished and passed along to future generations. So here are some ideas. Family night is one of them, and we mentioned to you the other day that great game that you can buy. It's called the Ungame. You can do all kinds of things on family night. The key is to set that night aside and don't let anything or anyone, including technology, interrupt it. Put it in your calendar. Let's say that you say Tuesday nights is our family night. Don't set appointments with the boys or with your friends. You know, there's a great game happening on Tuesday night. Well, it's family night. Let's see if we can keep it sacred. Turn the cell phone, computer, television, all that technology, set it aside and see what we can do together. It could be going for a walk. It could be playing board games. It could be all kinds of things that you can do as a family, but find ways to make it especially for your kids.
Number 2, date night. Do you have a date night with your spouse? If not, you need to. You need to plan it. You need to be intentional about it. Put it in your calendars on a regular basis and look forward to it. It's important for your kids to also understand that mom and dad are important to each other, that mom and dad are spending quality time together. It gives them security. But there's another aspect of date night if you have children. We've shared with you that we have 2 adult daughters. One is 30 years old and one is 35 years old. From a time our girls were very little, they had daddy dates. One at a time, not both of them. One at a time, Daddy would plan to have a date with them. And I still remember they were in kindergarten and they were going to their kindergarten class saying, I have a date tonight. And the kids would say, who do you have a date with? And our little girls would say, with my daddy. And then they would get home from kindergarten that afternoon, and I would help them take a shower and get dressed for their date with Daddy. It was nothing big. Sometimes it was to McDonald's Playland. Sometimes it was to pack a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and put it in a paper bag and go to the park and swing with Daddy. It was very simple things, but it was one-on-one time with Daddy. And he has continued that all through the years. And even now, our daughter that's a surgeon will call and say, Daddy, I don't have any surgeries next week. Are you home? Can I have a date with you?
That's the only thing that's changed is that now she pays, which is good. That's good. I like that part.
I think the surgeon can pay. But see, Mom doesn't go. It's daddy-daughter time. Why is that important? Because when our girls were very little, they learned how a man should treat a girl. They learned when Daddy would open the door for them on their date. When Daddy would pull out the chair at the restaurant. When Daddy would look out for them when they were crossing the road or holding hands walking on the sidewalk together. If you have a daughter, they will learn what to look for in a husband by the way Daddy treats them and by the way Daddy treats their mother. So it's important that we spend that one-on-one quality time. Mom, if you have a son, it's important for you to do the same thing with your sons. For you to have those dates. And before the date, Dad, you talk to your little boy and tell him how to treat Mommy on her date. Those are very important things, relationship things that our children learn from the time they're little. And like I told you, doesn't matter, 30 and 35 years old, and our girls still want their one-on-one dates with Daddy. It's a very treasured time.
Birthdays are another tradition that I hope you hold and cherish. Don't think that because your kids are 35, 40, 50 years old, we'll just forget it. No, don't just send a little text message. Give them a call, take them out, send them a card, whatever it is. Make it special so that they will remember you for those special events. Meal times are important. In fact, one of our colleagues at Andrews University, Dr. Dwayne McBride, did some research that shows that when families sit together to dinner at least 5 times a week, doesn't have to be every single night, but at least 5 times a week, there was a lower incidence of teenage pregnancy, and for boys there was a lower incidence of depression, drug abuse, and suicide. So it's important. I know the news come on at about that time, or you have that program, or you want to change the oil in the car, but if you can be intentional at spending time with your family at dinner time, sitting at the table, not watching the news, not on TV trays, but actually sitting together at the table. And again, get technology out of the way so you can actually talk, have conversations. It will be beneficial to your children.
Your faith. This is a very important one. Remember, these traditions and memories are only established as they become habitual, as they become repeated day after day. And none of these are more so true than when it comes to your faith. What is your faith tradition in your home with your Bible study and prayer, your family devotional time? It needs to become a habit, a memory, a tradition. With your prayer time, how you pray around the dinner table, that becomes a tradition. Sabbath worship. What do you do Friday night at sundown when Sabbath starts? I know we always had a tradition in our home. Every Friday night when Sabbath started, Even though my husband we were in the ministry, we've always been in the ministry our whole lives together, but on Friday night, he would try to make a commitment to being home when the Sabbath started for our girls. And we had a special candle. We called it our Sabbath candle. And every Friday night, right as the sun was setting, as a family, we would light our special Sabbath candle. It would only get lit Friday night, Sabbath. And our girls had special toys that they could only play with on Sabbath. Special coloring books, special Bible books. And I had a bag that was labeled Sabbath Toys. You can't get it out any other day of the week because then it loses its specialness for Sabbath. All of those things. Being here at camp meeting, being here at Camp White Sand every year for camp meeting, that's a family tradition and a family memory that your children will take with them as they grow up.
For Sabbath, sometime along or somewhere along the way, we picked up a tradition, and that's how they happen. We started eating Mexican tostadas for a Friday evening dinner. Every Friday night, we'd make Mexican tostadas. And interestingly enough, when our older daughter went to Wisconsin Academy, the first Friday night, she called us crying, and we said, what happened? And she says, they didn't have tostadas tonight for dinner. Become a tradition for her. And in fact, we had Mexican tostadas for dinner, and then we would have a donut for dessert. But I explained the donut part is a theological reason for that, because the Bible says to keep the Sabbath day holy.
The next one, family vacations. How you have vacations. For us, if you ask our girls what they remember about family vacations, do you know it's not about fancy places we went to? It's not about money we spent. It was about the road trips, the time in the car, the games we played in the car together. Those are some of their best memories that they tell us today.
The license plate game. Have you ever played that game? Which province and what state, or the alphabet game, what letter or what sign starts with the letter A, and once you find A, then you find it with B and all that. We had all kinds of games and things that we did to make the time pass, and we can remember many of those trips even to this day. And of course, holidays, how you celebrate Christmas, Thanksgiving. I understand, do you have 4th of July here? You don't have 4th of July? You go from the 3rd to the 5th?
Don't let him tease you like
that. I didn't say, do you have Independence Day? I just asked, do you have 4th of July here? See? So you do have 4th of July.
You have to watch him, I'm telling you.
So how you celebrate the holidays, it's also an important time. To me, even though I didn't grow up with Thanksgiving in Colombia, to me, Thanksgiving is my favorite holiday of all. And so we try to get together as a family as much as we possibly can, whether we spend it at the girls' house or they come to our house. The point is that we're together as a family. So there you have it, 12 ingredients of successful families. Are they the only ones? Oh, I'm sure there are probably many others, and you could tell us of others that have worked for you. We're just giving you 12 that have worked for us and that are important to us. Again, see where you are, where you're not practicing one of these, and maybe start with one of them to begin to changes in your family. Thank you for allowing us to spend this week with you here at White Sand Camp, and we look forward to seeing you again. But before we say our goodbyes, we do want to have prayer. Father God, we thank you for allowing us this time. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to talk to our Canadian family and friends, and also to get reacquainted with our American friends as well. But thank you that we could talk about family. You created the family. You feel it's important. You want us to keep our families intact and strong. And so I ask you, Father, to bless everyone and everyone's family. I also know that some of our folks here are or have experienced a breakup in their families. And so I ask you to also strengthen them and bless them as they try to parent their children as single parents. And I know that some folks here may even be raising their grandchildren. And so also we pray for health, for life, for strength for them. as they take on this serious challenge. But above all, Father, bless the Seventh-day Adventist family here in Manitoba, Saskatchewan. May every church be blessed. May every pastor and their family be blessed. And may every leader here in the conference be blessed as well. Keep them all in your hands, and may we have another opportunity to meet again here on this earth. But if not, I pray that all of us will be together as that universal family in eternity. We commit ourselves to you and ask for your blessings in the name of Jesus. Amen. Amen.
Circle of Hope Network, doing life and being church together.